Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan. Welcome, guys. My name is Liaquat. Hope you guys are having a wonderful time. We are going through Mukhtasar al-Qudoori, and this is actually my second run of this video, second take. Inshallah, this will go well. Now, we have finished the chapter of Zakat. Last lesson on Zakat, inshallah, then we finished. If you guys like my channel, hit the subscribe and hit the like button, and let's continue then. Questions for you guys then. What are the conditions for Sadaqah Fitr to be wajib on a person? Does a person have to give Sadaqah Fitr on behalf of a wife? Which slaves does a person give Sadaqah Fitr on behalf of? What is the measure of Sa'ah? And how do the scholars interpret the difference of opinion in what a Sa' is made up of, according to Abu Hanifa and Abu Yusuf? How much do you give of each of the four items? A person accepts Islam after Fajr on Eid day. Does he have to give Sadaqah al-Fitr? Why is it ideal to give it before going to the Eid prayer? Alright, so first of all, as usual guys, we cover the difficult words. Sadaqah, you guys should know what that means. It means some sort of charity. Fitr, it means breaking fast. And here it's referring to the ending of Ramadan. So we call it Eid al-Fitr because it means it's the Eid where you no longer are fasting. Okay, so Eid al-Fitr. Then you have so Hur is free person, Muslim is a Muslim, Malik means owner, Miqdar means amount, and then you've got the word Nisab, which means, Nisab is Nisab. Put in the comments if you know. Fadilan, it means in excess, more than. Maskan is from Sakana Yaskunu, which means home. Thiyab is the clothing. Thob. Athath is the furniture, things that you own. Faras is horses. Silah, weapons. Abidihi lil khidma, so slaves. Jama' abd. Khidma, it means for service. Kharaja yakhruju, or yukhriju rather. Sigar means young. Then you got abid al khidma. Wala yuaddi, adda yuaddi, ta'diya. Zawja, wife. Yeah, so yuaddi means to pay. And kibar is adults. Iyal means care, in the care of. And mamalik, so it means jama' mamluk, which means slave, owned. Tijara is trade. And then you got the word sharikain, which means two partners. La fitrata, so fitrata is the same word that we mentioned before. Mawla is master, and sa is a type of measure, half, nisf. Sa is a type of measure. It kind of roughly equals about 3.1 something kilograms. Bur is wheat. The tamar is dates. Zabib is raisins. Sha'ir is barley. Thamani is 8. Artal is a type of measure. Okay, so artals make up a sa'. We're going to talk about that a bit later. Okay, and then we have Iraqi is basically attributed to Iraq. Yeah, Iraq. And then you got Khamsat Artal, Rital. Okay, so 5 Rital. Thuluth is a third. Then you got Yata'allaqu, associated. What else do we have here? Okay, Mustahab, you know what that means. Musalla is a prayer area, prayer place where you pray. Usually it's like, Eid ground where you pray Eid. They call it the Musalla. Akhara yuakhiru, to delay. And ikhraj, it means to take out or to pay. Alright, those are the words done, guys. Let's look a bit at i'rab and tarkeeb. Babu Sadaqat al-Fitr, mudaf mudaf ilayh is the khabar of a hidden mubtada hada. Sadaqat al-Fitri, mudaf mudaf ilayh becomes mubtada. Wajibatun becomes the khabar. Al-Hurri, al-Muslimi, or jar majroors over here. Straightforward tarkeeb, guys. Malikan is the first khabar of kana. And then limiqdar al-nisabi, mudaf mudaf ilayh, majroor. Fadilan is the second khabar of kana. An maskanihi, an jar, and then you got the majroor there. So you got the atafs and the ma'tufs. All of these make up yakhruju khidmati, so atafs there. Then you've got أخرج يخرج. This is okay. This is from باب إفعال. ذلك عن نفسه جار مجرور. وعن أولاده الصغار is the صفة of أولاد. لا يؤدي أدى يؤدي is the فعل فاعل. عن زوجته جار مجرور. ولا عن أولاده الكبار كبار is the صفة of أولاد. وإن كانوا في عياله جار مجرور. ولا يخرج عن مكاتبه مكاتب, so that's the contractual slave, and then you got مجرور. مماليك is a جمع مجرور. للتجارة is مجرور of لي, and then العبد actually it's supposed to be عبده, so change that. كسر is a mistake, so it's عبده. بين الشريكين لا فطرة لا نفي الجنس على واحد منهما ويؤدي أدى يؤدي المولى. Why is it مولى? Put in the comments. Why is it مولى with this little alif? المسلم is the صفة. الفطرة is the مفعول به. And then you got الكافر والفطرة. Okay. والفطرة is the مبتدا. Then you got النصف. نصف is مضاف. صاع is مضاف إليه. من بر أو صاع من تمر أو صاع sorry من تمر أو زبيب أو شعير مجرور. والصاع is مبتدا. عند أبي حنيفة محمد 8 أرطال. So that's خبر of صاع. And then you got okay, let me just move this a bit down so that you guys can see a bit clear. I know the text is quite a lot today, but bear with me inshallah. So بالعراقي جار مجرور. Now, does anyone know what you call this ya? Because Iraq is the name of a place, and then this ya that's attached to the end of it. If you know the answer to this, put it in the comments below. أبو يوسف مضاف مضاف إليه. 5 أرطال وثلث رطل. Yeah. And that becomes obviously, the خبر of مبتحدا. ووجوب الفطرة يتعلق فعل فاعل بطلوع الفجر الثاني. ثاني is the صفة of فجر. من يوم الفطر. فمن مات يموت موتا. فطرة لم تجب. فطرة is the فاعل of تجب. And then ومن أسلم أو ولد is always ولد here. Okay, it's not ولد. ولد means to give birth. ولد is given birth to. طلوع الفجر لم تجب فطرته again فعل فاعل. New sentence. والمستحب أن يخرج. Okay, so أن يخرج الناس الفطرة. Yes, المفعول به يوم الفطر. So والمستحب أن يخرج الناس الفطرة يوم الفطر قبل الخروج إلى المصلى مجرور. فإن قدموها قبل يوم الفطر جاز وإن أخروها في الفاعل يوم الفطر لم تسقط مجزوم وكان عليهم إخراجها. إخراجها is the ism of كان. Okay, and that's basically the tarkib done for you guys. Right, let's have a look at this mas'ala then. So, what is the mas'ala today? So, the first mas'ala that we will be covering today is basically who has to give Sadaqatul Fitr. So, Sadaqatul Fitr is the sadaqah which you basically give after Ramadan ends. And it's a kind of like compensation for sort of like flaws or shortcomings that you've had in your fasting. Right? So, our fasting isn't perfect. We do things which we're not supposed to do. So this is a kind of like way of making up for that. But not everyone has to give Sadaqatul Fitr. Right? So who has to give it? Who is it necessary upon? So the person who is necessary upon, so first of all, is a person who is free. So therefore, slaves don't have to give Sadaqatul Fitr. That's number one. Number two, the person has to be a Muslim, and therefore non-Muslims don't give it. And number three is that a person must own the nisab. Right? So we talked about nisab before. All those different types of nisabs. Here, the nisab has to be like zakat, free of any excess needs. So beyond your basic needs. So basic needs are like, your home, your furniture, your clothing, horses, all these kind of houses, weapons, books, you got all these things, even if they're very valuable, you don't take them into consideration when you're working out whether you are eligible or are necessary for you to give Sadaqah al-Fitr. It's the thing which is beyond this. Okay, so this is beyond basic needs. Let's have a look at the text then. So he says, Sadaqatul Fitr wajibatun is necessary ala al-hurri, on the free Muslim إذا كان مالكا, when he owns مقدار النصاب لمقدار النصاب, the amount of nisab. Right, so the nisabs, we're talking about what the nisabs are. Fadilan, and it has to be in excess of his home. So in other words, if the home is expensive, you don't take that into account. وثيابه, and his clothing, and أثاثه, and his furniture, فرسه, and his horse, meaning in them days they would have horses, nowadays it's cars. وسلاحه, and his weapons. وعبيده للخدمة, and his slaves, if he owns slaves and he uses them for personal use, service at home and whatever, then those are not taken into consideration. You don't calculate their value when you're working out whether you have to give Sadaqah al-Fitr or not. No, it's beyond that. يخرج ذلك عن نفسه, so who does he have to pay for? And normally zakat you only pay for yourself, but in Sadaqah al-Fitr there's actually 3 people you have to pay for. Number 1 is yourself. Number 2 is you have to give it on your kids. So if you've got minor kids under the age of puberty, for each one you're going to have to give Sadaqah al-Fitr. And number 3 is if you have any slaves, Muslim or non-Muslim, doesn't matter, you have to give it. Okay, and who do you not have to give it on behalf? There's 5 types of people you don't have to give it on their behalf. So he says يخرج ذلك عن نفسه, so he gives the Sadaqah al-Fitr on behalf of himself, وعن أولاده, and on behalf of his awlad who are sigar, young, under the age of puberty, meaning if he has adult children who are grown up, he doesn't give it on their behalf. وعن أبيده الخدمة, and his slaves which are for personal use. ولا يؤدي عن زوجته, there are 5 people that he doesn't give it on behalf. Number 1, he does not give Sadaqat al-Fitr on behalf of his wife. Right, now if he wants to give it optionally and he tells her, that's fine, but otherwise he's not obliged to give it on her behalf. And the adult children, so if he's got adult children over the age of puberty, then they have to give their own and he is not obliged to give theirs. But if he wants to give theirs and they're okay with it, that's fine. ولا يؤدي, he does not give عن زوجته, on behalf of his wife, ولا عن أولاده الكبار, nor on behalf of his adult children, because they are expected to give their own. Obviously, if he's kind and he wants to give it on their behalf and they're happy, then it's fine. وَإِنْ كَانُوا فِي عِيَالِهِ, even if they are in his care. Right? So even if the adult kids are living with him under the same roof, doesn't matter. Likewise, number 3, وَلَا يُخْرِجُ عَنْ مُكَاتَبِهِ, he doesn't have to give on behalf of his contractual slaves. So slaves that he's made a contract with, that if they pay a certain amount of money, they go free. He doesn't have to give it on their behalf. Right, so that's number 3. So we call them mukatabs. And number 4, he doesn't have to give it on behalf of slaves that he has for trade. Yeah, so business stock, inventory, he's got slaves that he buys and sells. He doesn't have to give zakat, he doesn't have to give Sadaqah al-Fitr on their behalf. So وَلَا يُخْرِجُ عَنْ مُكَاتَبِهِ وَلَا عَنْ مَمَالِكِهِ, he doesn't have to give on behalf of his mukatab, nor on behalf of his slaves. لِلتِّجَارَةِ, for trade. And finally, number 5, وَالْعَبْدُ بَيْنَ الشَّرِيكَيْنِ, the slave that's shared between 2 or more individuals. So al-abd بَيْنَ الشَّرِيكَيْنِ, he doesn't have to give Sadaqat al-Fitr on their behalf. So what does this exactly mean? So al-abd who is sharik, remember this is abdu case marfu with the dhamma. Abd, that is between 2 partners, la fitrata ala wahidin, there is no fitra upon either of the 2 owners. So let me just illustrate this for you guys. Min huma means the 2 owners. So let's say for instance there are 2 owners and these 2 owners have a slave. Does any one of them have to give zakat for their slave? No, they don't. Right, so you only give it if you are the sole owner of a slave. Right, so these 2 guys do not have to give it. That's what min huma goes back to. Alright, next masala. what if there's a master who's a Muslim? Does he have to give it on behalf of his non-Muslim slaves if he owns them? Hanafi say yes. وَيُؤَدِّي الْمَوْلَى الْمُسْلِمِ. The Muslim owner must give zakat al-Fitr, an abdihi al-kafir, on behalf of his non-Muslim slave. Alright, so that's basically, all forms of slaves you have to give on behalf of, except for the mukatabs and the trade slaves. Now, this reason why this masala is brought up is because there's an ikhtilaf between some of the madhabs, right? So the Malikis, for example, they say you don't give it on behalf of Muslims, on non-Muslim slaves, only on behalf of Muslim slaves. And the Hanafis say no, you have to give it on behalf of everyone. Right, that's done. Next masala now. Right, the next masala is a bit of, you need your thinking caps on, right? So listen carefully to this. So when we're talking about fitr, right, when we're talking about Sadaqah al-Fitr, what do you have to give Sadaqah al-Fitr on? Like, can you give it anyway? No. So the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned 4 things that you can use to calculate your Sadaqah al-Fitr, right? And he mentioned the measurements that were in them days. So the measurements that were in them days was the sa'. It's like a cup, like a large cup, which can hold just over 3 liters. Right? You call this the sa'. And he said that you either give half a sa', half of this cup of wheat to the poor, or you give one sa', one of these cups of barley, or you give one sa', 1 cup of dates, or you give 1 cup, 1 sa' of raisins. All right, that's these 4 options he gave us. So whichever one that we want to give, we can either give these items to the poor, or we can actually get their monetary equivalent and we can give those. It's up to you, whichever one is easy. Usually giving the monetary equivalent is actually much easier and it's more beneficial for the poor. So one sa' of raisins, or 1 sa' of dates, 1 sa' of barley, or 1/2 of wheat. So he says, al-fitratu, Sadaqat al-Fitra is half a sa' of bur, which is wheat, or 1 sa', 1 sa' of tamar, which is dates, or zabib, or raisins, or sha'ir, or 1 sa' of barley. Alright, so you can do that. Now here is where the slightly complicated issue arises, which is that in the olden days, when they used to have cups, like let's say for example I've got this cup. Cups were not made in a standard way. There wasn't a standard mold of how they used to make cups. So the cups differed slightly. So this is like my cup, but maybe my next door neighbor's got a cup which is slightly bigger than this, and maybe another next door neighbor's got a cup which is slightly smaller than this. So their sa' would differ from place to place. Okay, they had different like sa's that they would use. So Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he says that the sa' that you should use is a sa' which equals to 8 ritl. 8 ritls. And Imam Abu Yusuf rahimahullah, he says the sa' that you use is a sa' that equals 5 1/3 ritls. What does all that mean? Right, so let me explain. So Abu Hanifa and Imam Muhammad on one side, Abu Yusuf on the other side. So Imam Hanifa says 8 ritls and Abu Yusuf says 5 1/3. This is supposed to be wrong place. It's supposed to be Abu Hanifa and Muhammad. And Abu Yusuf on his own. And Abu Yusuf says 5 1/3 ritls. And see, let me tell you the story. Imam Abu Yusuf, he basically used to be on the position of Abu Hanifa, that the sa' is made up of 8 ritl. Right? Now, you guys don't know what 1 ritl is equal to, but I'm going to explain that to you in a bit. But when Imam Abu Yusuf became the judge, the Chief Justice, and he went to Medina, he met Imam Malik rahimahullah over there, and Imam Malik's position was that the sa' is equal to 5 1/3 ritl. Okay? And Imam Abu Yusuf said, how comes? So Imam Malik rahimahullah told one of the people to bring their grandfather's cup, he was basically a Sahabi, the grandfather was a Sahabi, passed away. And he says, this is the sa' which was used in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And when Abu Yusuf measured it, he found it to be 5 1/3. So this is basically the position that was held by Abu Yusuf according to many of the Hanafis. So is there any difference between the two? Is the Abu Hanifa version of the sa' larger than the Abu Yusuf one? So later Hanafis have differed on this issue. So some of the Hanafis have said that this is actually the same thing. The cup is exactly the same. And the reason why there's this difference in the 8 and the 5/3 is simply because the size of the ritl, according to Abu Yusuf, seems to be larger than the size of Abu Hanifa. Abu Hanifa, when he says a ritl, is actually considered to be slightly less in size. So therefore, more ritls would come inside of the cup. Yeah, so the cup is exactly the same. It's just how you kind of measure the ritls. So 1 sa', let's say, equals 3.16, let's just say 3.16 kilos. Yeah, kilograms. It's supposed to be liters, right? Because it's a cup, but just to kind of make it easier, some of them have converted it into weight. So 3.16 kilograms, right? That's 1 sa'. So therefore, if that's the case, according to some of the Hanafis, there is no real difference between Imam Abu Hanifa's position and Imam Abu Yusuf's position on this issue. Right? Both of them are really saying the same thing. It's just what they call 8 ritls is what Abu Yusuf calls 5 1/3 ritl. Yeah, that's all the differences. Alright, so let's have a look at this then. So 8 ritls, 5 1/3 ritls is exactly the same thing. It both equal 3.16, right? And so technically, you know, if you divide 3.16 into 8, yeah, it's going to equal to 0.395 kilograms. Yeah, G is basically supposed to be kilograms. Okay, so ignore the G is supposed to be kg. And if you divide 3.16 by 5 1/3, right, then it's going to equal to, what does it come out to be? 0.596 kilograms. Yeah. So basically, the unit of a ritl, according to Imam Abu Hanifa, is equal to 0.395, and the unit of ritl, according to Imam Abu Yusuf, is 0.596. And therefore, it's basically the same thing. So that's one position. This is one opinion that some of the later Hanafis have mentioned. I actually got this from a book called al-Fiqh al-Hanafi wa Adillatuhu by Sheikh Sagharji. Okay, so he's mentioned this. Was one opinion. The second opinion is that these are two different. In other words, Imam Abu Yusuf's cup size is actually physically smaller than Imam Abu Hanifa's one. Right? So, in other words, the 1 sa' according to Abu Hanifa is 3.16 kilograms, and the 1 sa' according to Abu Yusuf is actually 1 sa' is equal to 2.1 kilograms. Yeah, so there is a difference. It's like literally 1 kilo difference. Right? So it's like 1 kilo difference. So that's the second opinion, that no, the size of the cups is different. Anyway, whatever the opinion is, there are two of these possibilities, but we don't have anything categorical that's been mentioned of the exact what actually comes into this. Now, if you want to do further research on this, you can by all means do further research, and you can find out further information about how in the early days they would use these units. But let's go back to our masla then. So the sa' itself, if we were to make a table now, let's make a table. Let me just shrink this just so that you guys can see this a bit better. Alright, so if we take the first opinion, which is that Abu Hanifa and Abu Yusuf are really saying the same thing, i.e. the sa' is exactly the same, it's just the difference in what a ritl is, the size of a ritl. Yeah. In that case, then one sa' of raisins is literally 3.16 kilograms, 3.16 kilograms of dates, 3.16 of barley, and half of that of wheat, which is 1.58. Yeah, 1.58 kilograms of wheat. And if we take the second opinion, which is no, the two cups are different, then it's 2.1 kilograms of raisins, 2.1 kilograms of dates, 2.1 kilograms of barley, and then half of that of wheat, which equals 1.05 kilograms. Yeah, so those are the two that are out there. Alright, so was-sa'u, and the sa' in the Abi Hanifata, according to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, is Muhammad, thamaniyatu artal, is made up of thamaniyatu artal according to the measurement of the Iraqis. So the Iraqi measurement, according to them. وقال أبو يوسف خمسة أرطال, 5 rittles and a third of a rittle. This is according to the people of Hijaz, Medina. Okay, the Medina measurement. Anyway, now when we say a person now qualifies or is now obliged to pay the Sadaqah al-Fitr, when does that exactly occur? So if I make a timeline for you, if I say, for example, like this is timeline, you know when Fajr starts, it's basically, if at the time of Fajr you are a free Muslim that owns the nisab, right? That's what it is basically. So on Eid day, at Fajr time, if you're there, if you're alive, then you basically have to give Sadaqah al-Fitr. If you died before Fajr, you wouldn't have to give it. So wujubul fitrati, the obligation of fitra, yata'allaqu, is attached to tulu al-Fajr al-Thani, is the rising of the second Fajr. Min yawm al-Fitr, from of the day of Fitr, meaning of Eid day after Ramadan. Yeah, so therefore, if you were to die, man mata qabla dhalika, whoever dies before Fajr, for that, lam tajib fitratu, his fitra will not be necessary on him, right? Because he wasn't alive at that time. And what if a person was to accept Islam or was to be born after Fajr time? Yeah, so after Fajr they were born. Man aslama, whoever accepts Islam, or wulida ba'da tulu al-Fajr, after the start of Fajr, lam tajib fitratu, his fitr would not be necessary. He wouldn't have to give Sadaqah al-Fitr. Yeah. So let me just draw this for you. So imagine this is before Fajr, guy dies, no Sadaqah. And after Fajr, a guy accepts Islam or is born, no Sadaqah. Yeah, when they say Fajr starts, meaning the beginning of Fajr. And that's it basically. Right, last masala. The last masala is basically this. When is the ideal time to actually give the poor Sadaqat al-Fitr? So al-Mustahab is recommended, and yukhrij al-nasu, that people who are going to give their Sadaqat al-Fitr to the poor should give their Sadaqat al-Fitr Yawm al-Fitr on Eid day, qabla al-khuruj, before they leave, set off to go to the Eid prayer, ila al-Musalla. So in the chapter of Eid, we talked about all this Eid and all that. And in there, we've even mentioned about giving the Sadaqat al-Fitr as well. Yeah, so ila al-Musalla, going to the Musalla. And the reason for this is basically because if there is someone who's poor, you want them to celebrate and be happy on Eid day and not worry about having to get handouts. So ideally, you should give them beforehand, on Eid morning, or even before that, a day or a week or a month before that, because that money, they can use it, they can buy stuff and they can celebrate with their families. But if you give it afterwards, it's fine, but it's just that they won't really kind of be able to utilize that money. So Hanafi says it's considered mustahab to give it before khuruj, setting off to the musalla, the Eid prayer. فَإِنْ قَدَّمُوهَا, if they were to give it in advance, قَبْلَ يَوْمِ الْفِطْر, before Yawm al-Fitr, jaza, that's permitted. وَإِنْ أَخَّرُوهَا, and if they were to give it delayed, عَنْ يَوْمِ الْفِطْر, then لَمْ تَسْقُطْ, it wouldn't drop. وَكَانَ عَلَيْهِمْ إِخْرَاجُهَا, and it's still going to be necessary for them to give, meaning if you miss giving it at that time, does it drop from you? No, you still have to give it, even if it's the next day. And if you remember, oh yeah, last Eid I didn't give my Sadaqah al-Fitr, you still got to give it now. Yeah. And that's it basically. So those are the main 3 masalas. So let me just draw this for you. So let's say Eid Salat is at 8 o'clock in the morning. Okay. You're on your way to go for Eid. Before you go for Eid Salat, go to the poor and give them. That's basically what it's saying. So those are the 3 masalas that we done today. So just to summarize, we talked about who is eligible, who is necessary for them to give Sadaqah al-Fitr, free Muslim, and the nisab issue. And you have to give on behalf of yourself, minor children, and slaves. And 5 types of people you don't have to give it on their behalf. Then we talked about the concept of the sa'. So there's 4 items that you have to give Sadaqah al-Fitr for. Wheat, half sa' wheat, and then 1 sa' of the other 3 items. And then we talked about the difference between Abu Hanifa and Abu Yusuf in the terms of what makes up a sa'. And finally, who has to give it. Or when do you become necessary for you to give? And that's it basically. Right, let's have a look at the questions then. So here's the questions. Question: what are the conditions for Sadaqah al-Fitr to be wajib on a person? Does a person have to give Sadaqah al-Fitr on behalf of wife? Which slave does a person give Sadaqah al-Fitr on behalf? What is the measure of sa'? How do the scholars interpret the difference of opinion in what a sa' is made up of between Abu Hanif and Abu Yusuf? How much do you give of each of the 4 items? A person accepts Islam after Fajr on Eid day. Does he have to give it, meaning give Sadaqah? Why is it ideal to give it before going for the Eid prayer or to the Eid prayer? Right, so you guys know now. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you for watching this video, guys. Really appreciate you watching it all the way to the end. This is actually my second take of this year, and it's just kind of like I did the whole thing, realized the sound wasn't working, but anyway, these things have qadar Allah. Thank you to all my patrons as well. Patrons, may Allah bless all of you and your families and your wealth and your health, and all your support that you guys show. Is this is what happens when you guys support. I take out time, I'll do it again and again until I get it right. And alhamdulillah, I mean, it's a long video, half-an-hour video, but alhamdulillah, with your support, I'm able to do this. Jazakumullah khair, may Allah, make this sadaqah jari for all of you. And any of you guys want to become supporters of my channel and help me make these kind of videos and help me on a monthly basis, then there's links in the bottom where you can become monthly donors to the channel, or even a one-off donor as well. It's all appreciated. It really helps me a lot. And that's it, guys. So thank you very much. Any suggestions, any comments, please leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.